Hi, welcome back to Educator.com. Today's lesson is Rhythmic Notation Continued. Today we're going to be addressing rhythms that are a little more complicated than the ones we previously looked at. We will be looking at an explanation of dotted quarter and dotted half notes. We will be understanding and explaining eighth notes, 16th notes, and 32nd notes. And we'll be creating measures with 8th, 16th, and 32nd notes. So don't be scared of these numbers. It's just a way of describing how we're dividing time. Rhythm is all about writing down your understanding of how a measure is divided up. So we have to use our language, which is whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. We already went over those. The 8th note, 16th note, 32nd note, those are just faster divisions of the whole note. So basically all this is just really a new language that you're learning. So let's just take it step by step really slowly and you will understand it. First, we're going to go over something called dotted notes. This is something that you will actually see a lot, so it's really important that you understand what it means. We'll start with explaining a dotted half note. So when we have a dotted half note, all it means is that we have a dot next to this note. What we do with this dot is we remember that this dot adds half of this beat to itself. So essentially what the dot, it's like a shorthand, it's like a symbol. It means this. In this case, we are adding the length of one quarter note to this half note because half of a half note is 2 quarter notes, right? So if we divide this in half, we add 1 quarter note. Now, if we have a dot next to a quarter note, we'll look at that in a second because there are 2 eighth notes and a quarter note. That's something we're learning in this lesson. So one of the things you'll be learning today is that there are 2 eighth notes and 1 quarter note. So when you put a dot next to a quarter note, you add an eighth note. So that makes this equals 1.5 beats. Let's stick with half note for now. It's a little easier to understand. So all this means is there are 3 beats in a measure. This is going to really help us understand the concept of 3/4, which is a time signature that we're going to learn about a little later. 3/4 is when you have 3 beats in a measure, and this is a really easy way. This is like the 3/4 equivalent of the whole note. Do you remember in 4/4? When you have a whole note, that just means you play one note for the entire measure. This is the same thing. If we had 3 beats in the measure, which we haven't learned yet, but just trust me, this would be, you'd play 1 beat for the whole measure, and that would be 3 counts for the entire measure. So let's try some more. What you do is you just draw a dot next to the note like that, and it automatically conveys that this is 3 beats. If we have a dot by a whole note, half of a whole note is 2 half notes, right? So you'd add a whole note plus a half note. That would be 6 beats. So the dot is something that's really important to remember. Now, when we learn about eighth notes, we're going to go over it in a little bit. But this is an eighth note. It has a flag, and it's just half of a quarter note. So eighth notes can be written like this. They can also be written like this. It means the same thing. They can also be written like this. Just because they're written connected to one another or separate, it doesn't mean that these are any faster or slower than these. They all mean the same thing. And there's 2 eighth notes in every quarter note. So when you have 1 quarter note with a dot, that means you take the quarter note plus half of a quarter note. So since there are 2 eighth notes in each quarter note, the dotted quarter note equals 1.5 beats. 1.5. So usually dotted quarter notes are written in conjunction with another eighth note. We don't normally have 1.5 beats just hanging out by itself in a measure of 2/4, for example. 2/4 is a time signature that you just learned about in the last lesson. So we have an A and an A. Let's match that. We have an A and an A. This is 2 beats and this is 2 beats because this is 1.5 plus half. The eighth note is half of a beat. If we would clap this rhythm, it would sound like this. 1, 2, and. There are 3 little eighth notes in here and 1 eighth note there. We need 2 beats total in the measure. So 1, 2, and, like that. That's how you would clap it. And if we count 2 beats in the measure, 1, 2, like that, then if you're playing this, it would sound like this. If you repeat it, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. This will become more clear as we delve into eighth notes a little bit further. So let's move on to eighth note.